Hey everyone, this is Player 1, and today I bring you a detailed review of Hyperdimension Neptunia Re Birth 2 Sisters Generation, available on the PC, PlayStation Vita, and PlayStation TV. This is part of Compile Heart's process of remaking all the games in the series under the Rebirth title. Like the other games in the series, the game takes place in the world of game industry, where the four goddesses represent the four main console manufacturers, Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation, and Microsoft, all rule over their own individual nations as typical idols. This sequel does not directly tie into the original game, which is unfortunately a common trait within many JRPGs. Instead, you begin by witnessing the defeat and capture of the main goddesses by an unknown force in the game industry graveyard. A few years later, If and Kampa show up to attempt to rescue them, but only the CPU candidate Netgear escapes, and that's where the adventure begins. Rebirth 2 focuses on the CPU candidates, headed by Netgear, who are trying to save the CPUs from A4, who wants to resurrect the deity of sin. The story for this game isn't incredibly deep, as is usual for the series. However, it is serviceable and gets you from point A to B without major upset. Its lighthearted and very silly nature fits with the overall presentation of the game. This also means that the story is extremely predictable except for one possible ending, which eventually led to many people disliking this game. Ultimately, you will enjoy many of the cool characters you meet. That is, if you don't mind plenty of fan service. One funny quirk is that the idea of pirating games is really harped on as the most evil thing you can do. Makes sense for a game developer. The pacing is pretty good. The story can definitely push the boundaries of patience you have with silliness, but the gameplay is phenomenal, so it works out in the end. One nice thing is that you can fast forward battle animations. This is an incredibly valuable feature that every turn-based combat system should employ. On the Vita, it's activated by placing your finger on the screen. As I hinted to before, the gameplay is great. This is what really carried the game. It consists of a hybrid turn-based combat, similar to the Tales of games. You can move your character around during your turn to position them as you please. Each character has a specific size and shape hitbox depending on their weapon, so strategy comes into play as you choose the position of your character before she attacks. If you played the previous game, then nothing has really changed, except now you can have up to 4 members in your party during combat. There is a basic relationship Lily rank system, where you can couple characters for special moves and stat boosts. The story progresses as you go through dungeons and get to events, which usually involve a boss or mini-boss fight. Some of these you actually are supposed to lose on purpose, but you won't know that till you go through it. Apart from this, you get scenes which involve scripted dialogue with the typical still images that change as the conversation progresses. I really would like to see JRPGs evolve from this. I guess at least the girls breathe if you're into that sort of thing. One thing you must do is save often, especially every time you find a save point in the dungeon and before an event, so keep that in mind. Another thing you have to keep in mind is leveling up. It's absolutely necessary to level up. I highly suggest leveling up at least 2 to 3 levels per dungeon. The good news is that with the gameplay being the strongest aspect of the game, I am hesitant to even use the word grind, because leveling up is actually very fun. The planned remake system is a cool mechanic also that allows you to mess with certain enemies or create new dungeons. For example, you can alter dungeons you have previously entered and change the types of enemies or items you find within. One new addition is the minigame Stella's Dungeon. Here you access Stella and send her on an adventure. If she succeeds, you get items. To help her succeed, you equip better and better weapons and items like ones to avoid traps. It's not too deep, but it's a nice little side thing to entertain you. As far as the presentation is concerned, Rebirth 2 has a great anime style. There were no real glitches, which is nice. A couple of the dungeons did have some frame drops, but it never bothered me. If you ever played Rebirth 1, you have pretty much seen all the dungeons and enemies. Even within Rebirth 2, many of the dungeons and enemies are identical. The menus are pretty clear to use, although I would have liked to see a better system for changing equipment. Graphics wise, the remake is definitely better than the original. I enjoyed the special moves and the overall graphics look great for a Vita title. Just keep in mind, you're basically getting Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1 with a new story and new characters. The music is okay, it fits the environment, although it can get repetitive while trying to grind levels. It's basically a mixture of JRPG techno and happy-go-lucky music for story dialogue scenes. The voice track really shines in Japanese though. English track is good, but the battle phrases can get a bit annoying. Some of the characters also tend to be annoying in English, so keep that in mind. There is some loading, but it's not really an issue. You can progress very quickly from overworld to specific dungeons. Overall, you will see some nice animations. The intro CGI scene was especially great. I wish there were more CGI scenes throughout the game. I would like to see more variations in the picture stills as well. For the most part, the 3 to 4 expressions that each of the characters have works well, but there are a couple times where the facial expressions don't quite fit the dialogue. There is plenty of content in this game, which is great. Several playthroughs are required to unlock all the plans and the harder to unlock characters. There are also 9 endings. One ending specifically, although not canon, is especially memorable. Some people didn't like it because it got real dark and serious, but I love the twist. Keep in mind there are very specific requirements for the ending. I recommend you check an online guide early on, because if you miss one of the prerequisites, you will have to start over on another New Game Plus to get it. Some chapters are only unlockable if you're going for a specific ending, so you won't see everything in one playthrough. It took me about 30 to 35 hours for the normal ending, which is a bit lackluster. That's a little bit longer than the average playthrough because I included most of the dungeons and loved leveling up to the point where I was over leveled for later quests, but that's just how I like it. I am a bit disappointed with the amount of customizable content in the relation to Rebirth 1. Many of the ones available are just recolorings of the same dress. With this in mind, overall there is a ton of content here, so you get to play as much as you would like. So what's the verdict? Well, we give this game an 8 out of 10. This is a great game that is loads of fun to play, and that's the most important part. It's far from a perfect game, especially considering the recycled assets from its predecessor, but it is a must-have. The solid combat is addictive and fun. Compile Heart has really figured out a magic recipe of strategy and action turn-based combat. The story is not the best, but for fans of the cute, goofy anime characters, it will not disappoint. Beyond that, if you go for that special conquest ending, you will really be in for a treat. There is plenty of content, and the New Game Plus unlockable characters and multiple endings allow for plenty of replayability. If you have a PS Vita or a fan of great JRPGs, I highly suggest you pick this one up. You won't be disappointed. Alright, that's the review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave me any comments below about the game if you have had the chance to play it or are looking forward to playing it, and if you have any suggestions to improve the reviews. Apart from that, please like the video, and if you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. Thanks for watching.